Okay guys, so today we are going to start a new chapter. However, we're going to do it a little differently today and then Monday, and then we'll be done with social studies. Because we still have 2 more regions to get to in this book, and only 2 more days of social studies, we're just going to do the very first lesson of chapters 10 and 12, just so that you can get a little introduction into these 2 regions, or to these 2 regions that we didn't actually get to this year. So today we're going to start with chapter 10, the Southwest. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to open your textbook to page 300. We're going to look at the map of the region first. Now I know it's hard to see up here because of all the glares and everything, and the sun's out, so that makes it even harder to see. But just do your best. At least you have the map in front of you on page 300 and 301, and then you can see the general area that I'm pointing to and then find it in your book. So, before we start, let's look at which states are in the Southwest. We can tell because they are this darker green color. So, this textbook, because remember some textbooks think it's different, but this textbook considers the Southwest states to be Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. So only 4 states in the Southwest. So let's find the capital of each of these states. Remember, when if we look at the key, we can see that the state capital is marked with a star. So first, let's find the state capital. Let's go from east to west, and let's start with the state capital, Oklahoma, which we see is Oklahoma City. Now you can't see the star, that's because it is underneath this little yellow dot showing an inset picture of Oklahoma City. But if we look at the other cities mentioned in Oklahoma, which is only Tulsa, we see that it just has a regular dot. So that means the capital has to be Oklahoma City, because they're not going to not include the capital city. So the capital of Oklahoma is Oklahoma City. Then in Texas, the capital is Austin. New Mexico, the capital is Albuquerque. Oh, I'm sorry, nope, Santa Fe. Sorry. I know that too. I always quiz myself on capital cities. But I forgot, and I can't tell which one is a star from looking up here. Santa Fe is the capital of New Mexico, not Albuquerque. And then Phoenix is the capital of Arizona. So, we can see all the states and then all the capitals. We can tell that Oklahoma is maybe a lot more rural because they really only have a few major cities compared to everywhere else. Yes, Texas is also pretty rural in a lot of places, but it's really big, so they're still able to have a lot of major cities even while being very rural. We can also see that there are a few national parks that is marked with this lighter green, which is different because normally we're used to seeing it in the dark green, but this lighter green marks some national parks. We do have quite a few national parks in the Southwest. We have probably the one that is one of the most famous national parks, the Grand Canyon, up in northwestern Arizona. We see the Grand Canyon. Down in southern Arizona, we see Saguaro National Park. In New Mexico, we have Carlsbad Caverns National Park. And then just below that, in Texas, we have Guadalupe Mountains National Park. And then further south, kind of at the bend of Texas, right here, we see Big Bend National Park. And I think that's it for national parks. Yep, that's it for national parks. And then we also see national forests, which is kind of this like green, crinkly area. There are a lot. There's some really big national forests in Arizona and New Mexico. We see, oh, I forgot a national park. Sorry. Petrified Forest National Park. Sorry. And I've even been there and I forgot about it. I've been to Petrified Forest and I've been to the Grand Canyon, but I haven't been to Saguaro, Carlsbad Caverns, Guadalupe Mountains, or Big Bend. One day, though, I'll get there. So we have this big national forest, and then we have a national forest right around the Grand Canyon, And then we have some over here. These ones aren't named like a lot of like the other. I don't see any names for them like we've seen in other maps of the region. But there are quite a few. You can see there's really no national forest in Oklahoma or Texas. That's because they just don't have as many trees. Oklahoma is very much, there's a whole lot of prairies and farmland. Same with Texas. And Texas also has some areas that are very desert-like. So, there are a lot of forests and trees in New Mexico and Arizona, but there's not as much in Texas or Oklahoma. So we know right away that wood would probably not be, the lumber industry probably is not a great a resource that we would find, or an economy that we would find in Oklahoma or Texas. Okay, so now that we've talked about the map, let's go ahead and move on to lesson 1, which starts on page 310. So go ahead and turn your page to 310, and then let's read together. Go ahead and read along with me while I read out loud. Geography of the Southwest. You are there. With a jolt, the giant hot air balloon lifts off. It takes you high into the blue skies above Albuquerque, New Mexico. You see the Sandia Mountains towering above the city. The Chihuahuan Desert spreads to the south. Cottonwood trees and low bushes line the banks of the Rio Grande. You know this river flows all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. What a great way to see the Southwest. So I've got the map of the United States up here from over there, so I don't have to like make you give you motion sickness by bringing you over there with the iPad. I know, it's hard to see. I don't know what to do. The sun is shining directly in the classroom, which is making this harder to see. But we can see, so they mentioned the Rio Grande. The Rio Grande is a major river that flows through the Southwest. It flows from the Gulf of Mexico. I can't really tell, but it's somewhere around here. And then it flows across Texas and up into New Mexico, and then it keeps going. It is a very long river. Let's move on to the next page. Plains and deserts. The Southwest includes only 4 states: Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arizona. Still, the region stretches from the Gulf of Mexico in the east to the Colorado River in the west. So what they're saying here is that even though there's only 4 states in the South that are considered part of the Southwest, it is a massive area of land. That's because the 4 states that are included are, well, Texas is the biggest state, and then the Arizona and New Mexico are very massive states, and Oklahoma is pretty big as well. So even though there's only 4 states, they are 4 very big states. So it does, they do take up a lot of space. They start over here along the Gulf of Mexico, and then they go across this border, and then they end at the Colorado River, which flows around here. The Colorado River is the river that flows through the Grand Canyon and carved out that Grand Canyon millions of years ago. Texas and Oklahoma. The Southwest has a variety of landforms. In Texas, the lowest and wettest lands lie along the Gulf of Mexico. This area is part of the coastal plain. Remember, a coastal plain is that flat area of land that's right along a coast. Inland parts of the Central Plains reach into Oklahoma. So we see the coastal plain down here, all along the Gulf of Mexico. So Texas does include part of the coastal plain. And then the eastern parts of Oklahoma are also part of the Central Plains, like us. Because remember, the Central Plains is, remember the interior plains is the whole interior of the United States. Well, then we have the Central Plains, which are over here, and then the Great Plains, which are over here, which we learned about in the Midwest chapter. So Oklahoma does include parts of the the Central Plains, which is what we are a part of. Farther west, the land gets higher. The high, dry grasslands of the Great Plains extend to western Texas. There, the low ranges of the Rocky Mountains surround the Chihuahuan Desert. So, not only are parts of the Southwest in the Central Plains, but also we've got the Great Plains in West Texas and a little bit of that Oklahoma Panhandle. So that also includes the Great Plains. So there's plains. We've learned that there are plains. There are coastal areas in the Southwest. And then now we're getting into the mountains. So we've got desert down in the southern part, the Chihuahuan Desert. And then the mountains start rising out of that Chihuahuan Desert. New Mexico and Arizona. The Chihuahuan Desert spreads north from Mexico into Texas and southern New Mexico. Farther west, the Sonoran Desert covers southern Arizona. In fact, deserts cover much of New Mexico and Arizona. So not only have we got the Chihuahuan Desert over here, now we have the Sonoran Desert over here. Now that's kind of funny because we talked about how there were a lot of forests in Arizona and New Mexico, but also much of the state is desert. So I wonder how that works. Maybe we'll find out. Maybe it's something that you can look into. The northern parts of New Mexico and Arizona share the Colorado Plateau. Over time, wind and water have eroded mesas and buttes into the plateau. A mesa is a hill with a flat top and steep sides. So that's our first vocabulary word. Oh, sorry, so we're on chapter, the lesson title, the notes titles. It's chapter 10, lesson 1. So make sure you have the title of these notes, chapter 10, lesson 1, and make sure that you have the date on a clean sheet in your social studies vocabulary section. And the first word is the word mesa, which is a hill with a flat top and steep sides. So it looks kind of like this. I know you might say that looks like a volcano, but no, it's much wider at the top than a volcano is. You can see pictures on that picture at the top of page 311. You can see some mesas in the background. Those are those smaller hills with the flat tops. They have very steep sides, so they are different than a plateau in that they are a lot smaller. A plateau, you may not even realize that you're at the top of a mountain with a flat top. Whereas a mesa, they are much smaller. So you can see that it is a hill with very steep sides and a flat top. And now when I say hill, I don't mean like a couple feet high. I mean like hundreds of feet high. They're pretty tall, but they're not quite mountains. They're still not big enough to be mountains. A butte is a steep hill of rock with a flat top, like a mesa, but smaller. So, number 2, butte is a steep hill of rock, so it's made of rock, with a flat top, so it's like a mesa in that it's a steep hill with a flat top, but it's smaller than a mesa. So this is one of those things, if you look in the background in front of the mesas, you see some buttes. Those are just those little ones. Like if you go to Monument Valley, or if you've ever heard of Monument Valley, which is in the Southwest, there are a whole lot of buttes. There are some mesas too, but there are a lot of buttes. That's what they call the monuments. Okay, so let's go ahead and, the reading check question. So this, remember, I'm going to ask the question. You're going to pause the video, write the answer right under number 2, and then play the video to check. Which state has the most varied land? You can tell by reading. So go ahead, look over, figure it out, pause this video, answer, and then play it. Okay, so if you answered Texas, you are correct. It has plains, it has desert, it has a few mountainous regions in some of it. There is a lot going on in Texas. There are grasslands, there is a coastal area. Texas has the most varied land. That means there are the most landforms or things like that in Texas. Okay, let's go ahead and turn the page, and we'll look at page 312. Climate. Climate varies in the Southwest. The Gulf Coast has a hot, humid climate. The mountain areas can be cold and snowy in winter. Still, most of the Southwest has a hot and dry climate. So, we can see that not only is the land varied greatly in the Southwest, but also the weather varies greatly. The rain shadow. The mountains in the west are the main reason that the Southwest is so dry. The mountains block moist ocean air from reaching the region. So that means Pacific air. Because of these mountains in the western part of the Southwest, that blocks the moist air coming from the Pacific Ocean. The Southwest lies in the rain shadow, or the drier side of the mountains. So, number 3 is rain shadow, which is the drier side of the mountains. And we can see that by looking at this map. So we've got the ocean over here, and then we've got this mountain range, the Rocky Mountains. This moist air cannot pass those Rocky Mountains because they're really too tall. So that means this area, the Southwest, which is what we're talking about, is in that rain shadow. It's on the drier side because the wetter side is obviously going to be the side that's closer to the ocean. So the Southwest is on the drier side of these mountains that pass through. When rain comes to the desert, it often comes in a cloudburst or a sudden heavy rain. So number 4 is the word cloudburst, which is a sudden heavy rain. So that means all of a sudden it's just a downpour, a massive downpour, and then it doesn't last very long, but it brings so much rain that sometimes it causes a lot of flooding. The rain quickly fills the dry beds of rivers and streams. It also flows through arroyos, deep ditches carved over time by running water. So our next word, I'm going to run out of space. Oh well, I'll just erase. Arroyos are deep ditches carved by running water. So they're not quite riverbeds, because riverbeds are carved by a river that was there for a long time, whereas arroyos are carved by that running water, usually from those cloudbursts. So that means that water's not there all the time, like in a riverbed. But there is enough of it, and it is there often enough that it was able to carve a deep ditch over time. Desert plants. During spring, wildflowers bloom in the deserts and on the plains of the Southwest. Former First Lady Lady Bird Johnson founded the National Wildflower Research Center in Texas. Its goal is to use native plants to protect the Southwest environment. So we can see up here on the top of page 312, we can see a whole lot of desert wildlife. So there's lots of plants and lots of animals. Sometimes we think of the desert as a barren wasteland. Well, that's not true at all. There are lots of plants and lots of animals. Just because there's not much water in the desert doesn't mean that these plants and animals can't survive. because there is some water. There's enough. They get enough of these cloudbursts and things that they do get enough water, but these animals and plants don't need as much water as others to survive. So as we go through, I want you to find the number, and then we will name the plant or animal. So in the illustration, number 1 is the saguaro cactus. Number 2 is the Gila woodpecker. Number 3 is the collared lizard. Number 4, that tall one, is the century plant. Number 5 is a roadrunner. We read about those earlier in the year. Number 6 is the barrel cactus. Oh, there it is down at the bottom. It's at the very bottom. Those are shorter, wider cactuses. Number 7 is the prickly pear cactus. And then number 8, we have a tarantula. So there are lots of animals and plants in the desert. The reading check at the bottom. What do you think happens in the desert after a cloudburst? So go ahead, pause that video, answer the question under number 5, and then play the video to check your answer. Well, if you answered that people, animals, and plants use that water in these streams and rivers that are formed by the cloudburst, then you are correct. Okay, let's move on to page 313. Okay. Sources of water. There are many challenges to life in the desert. Finding enough water for a growing population is one of the biggest. In the Southwest, people have found different ways to overcome the scarcity or limits of this resource. Groundwater and rivers. Most parts of Arizona and New Mexico have little rainfall, and there is little surface water. However, in many places in these states, there is water in aquifers. This groundwater collects in layers of sand and rock beneath Earth's surface. So I'm going to have to erase all these words, so if you still need to write them, then pause the video and finish writing them, because I need space. So, erase. Okay, and number 6 is the word, make sure I spell it right, aquifer. Aquifer. And an aquifer is groundwater that collects in layers of sand and rock beneath Earth's surface. We actually live above an aquifer too, and that's why our water is so good, people say. To reach the water in aquifers, people drill wells. The large rivers in these states include the Colorado River in Arizona, which we already looked at, right around here, and the Rio Grande and the Pecos River in New Mexico, which we also found the Rio Grande. I'm not exactly sure where the Pecos River is, and unfortunately I can't see on this map. So if you want to kind of look that up, you can, to figure out where in New Mexico that river is. People use dams to control the flow of these rivers. A reservoir forms upstream from a dam. A reservoir is a human-made lake. So, number 7 is the word reservoir. That is not a natural lake, it's a human-made lake, and it is usually located at the top of a dam. Not always, but you'll usually find reservoirs at the top of a dam. Water from the reservoir is released downstream as it is needed. So that's the purpose of the dam. The dam can let more or less water out of the reservoir when it's needed. Like if it hasn't rained for a while, well, they may open up the dam and let more water out than what they have been. In many places, aqueducts carry the water from dams and wells to places where it is needed. An aqueduct is a large pipe or canal built to carry water. So, number 8 is the word aqueduct, which is a large pipe or canal used to carry water. So, not all people live right near this river or this reservoir to get their water easily. So they have to use aqueducts to carry the water from the river or the reservoir to closer to where they live. Let's look at the picture at the bottom. This is a picture of Hoover Dam. So to the right, you see the whole dam. The Hoover Dam is massive. It is huge. And it lies on the border between Nevada and Arizona. So it's right around here. You can see it on your map on page 300. It controls the flow of the Colorado River. Its reservoir, Lake Mead, which is the picture below, provides much of Arizona's water. So, much of Arizona, because a lot of it is very desert-like, gets their water from this one lake in northwestern Arizona. So that's what those aqueducts do. They carry the water from the reservoir to different parts of the state. Okay, so let's do the reading check. I'll ask it, you answer underneath number 8, play the video to check your answer. How might dams help farmers and others during long periods of dry weather? Dry weather is very common in the Southwest. So how do dams help those farmers and then the other people during long periods of dry weather? Well, it's because if you answered water from the reservoirs can be released as needed, you are correct. It's a lot harder for a reservoir, which is a very large amount of water, to dry up than like a riverbed or a stream that may not have as much water. So that way the reservoir kind of holds all the water so that it doesn't dry up or go away as easily. And then during dry periods, the dam can release more water down the river or the stream. Okay, let's go ahead and turn the page, and we're going to talk about natural resources. Natural resources. The Southwest has many kinds of land resources. These natural resources include minerals, fuels, and forests. Minerals and fuels. The Southwest states are among the nation's top producers of minerals and fuels. Great amounts of oil and natural gas lie buried beneath the land in Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. The region also has coal, copper, and uranium deposits. Uranium is a metal used as fuel in some power plants. Forests. Some parts of the Southwest get enough rainfall for forests to grow. Eastern Texas and Oklahoma have forests of pine, oak, and hickory. Ponderosa pine trees cover parts of northern New Mexico and Arizona. We could see a lot of those ponderosa pine tree forests in the National Forest of northern New Mexico and Arizona. Farms and ranches. Although some parts of the Southwest get enough rain to grow crops, most farmers in the region must use irrigation to water crops. Irrigation is the use of canals, ditches, or pipes to bring water to dry places. So, number 9 is the word irrigation. And irrigation is the use of canals, pipes, well, I've got it out of order a little bit, but that's okay, or ditches to to bring water to dry places. So we can tell that irrigation is extremely important in the Southwest because we know there's a lot of these dry places. So they have to use a lot of these canals, pipes, or ditches to bring water to those dry places. Farmers in the Southwest grow cotton, wheat, vegetables, and citrus fruits each year. Ranching is also an important industry in the region, especially in the drier areas. Livestock can graze on the grassy land that is too dry for farming. Beef cattle are the largest source of income for ranchers in the Southwest. Sheep and goats are also raised on southwestern ranches. So even though there is a lot of land that is too dry, even with irrigation, to farm, luckily they can bring in ranching. So that's where people raise livestock because they can graze or eat that grass and those plants on the grassy land. Because even though it's too dry for farming, there are still those plants that don't need as much water that grow. So the livestock can graze on that, and then they don't need as much water to provide water for the animals as they do to provide water for farming. Because farming, you need a lot more water. Think about it. A farm is really, really big, and you have to water all of those crops. Whereas with animals, you can have 2 or 3 little kind of, I don't know what to call them, 2 or 3 areas with water in troughs. That's what I was thinking of, I think. Rather than having to water the whole land. You can just fill 2 or 3 troughs that the livestock can come and go as they need it. So let's look at this, the Southwest land use and resources map over here. I'm going to cover up the, I'm going to stand in front of the vocabulary words, so if you need to write them, pause right now and finish writing them, because I'm about to move in front of them so that I can be closer to the map. So let's look at this land use and resource map that you have in your book on page 314. We know that the colors show how the land is used, which means how humans come in and change and use that land. And then the symbols are the natural resources. So this is what is already there. Humans just come in and dig for it or mine for it or whatever. Land use, humans have to do something to have this happen. Resources, are already there. Humans just have to find it. So we can see that most of the land in the Southwest is this yellow color, which is used for cattle and sheep. So most of it is used for grazing. Most of the land is used for grazing. We see a lot in the the eastern area that is green, so that is more general farming. We know that most of this green is in the Central Plains, which we know the Central Plains gets a decent amount of rain. It is also pretty flat and usually has very fertile soil. So that is why so that's how we can tell that this area is the part that's part of the Central Plains. We also see a little bit is used for wheat and grain up in northern Texas. Let's see, there is some little used land. That is mostly probably just too desert-like to use it for anything else. Let's see, we see a little bit of fruit and vegetable growing around Phoenix. We can see, of course, as always, these cities have some dark pink around them because that is where the manufacturing takes place. Remember, factories need people, so most of the manufacturing goes on in and around big cities. We don't see too much forest. We do see some forest land over here, and a little up here, and then a little over here. But other than that, there's really not much forestry going on in this area. Again, because we know most of it is really too dry for there to be big forests like we've seen in the rest of the country. Then for the symbols, for the resources, we see that the resource that appears the most is oil or natural gas, which we learned about in the minerals and fuels paragraph. We also see quite a bit of coal, And we see a lot of uranium, okay? Because we learned that the Southwest has a whole lot of minerals and fuels to be mined or found. We do see a little bit of gold, but not as much gold as what they probably thought back when people were flocking to this area in the 1800s during the gold rush. So we see a little gold down here, but other than that, not too much. Let's see, anything else? We see some copper, which is another thing that is mined. Maybe that's what people found and thought was gold, but copper is not gold. And just a little bit of potash and some iron. And other than that, you know, no fishing. We don't see any fishing. Fishing is not a resource that is found often in the Southwest. So mostly we see we only see minerals and fuels in this resource list. Nothing else. Well, we know that the Southwest, based on reading this part of the lesson, we know the Southwest is a very good place to find minerals and fuels, and we can see that by looking at this map. Okay, let's do this reading check really quick. So you'll answer it underneath number 9, play the video to make sure you're correct, and then we'll read the summary, and then we'll be done. So, how do most Southwest farmers get water? Well, if you answered through irrigation, you are correct. Remember, they don't have a whole lot of surface water, groundwater. So they have to use irrigation to get it from the reservoirs or the aqueducts in order to bring it to their farms. Okay, let's read the summary. And it says, plains, deserts, mountains, and plateaus cover the Southwest region. Much of the region has a hot, dry climate. The region's natural resources include forests, minerals, fuels, and land for farms and ranches. Okay, that's it. You do have some homework. So get out your Friday packet, open past the math anchor chart and the reading quiz, and the very last page is a crossword puzzle. I know some of you love crossword puzzles, so I know you'll be very excited. The clues, of course, are down here. I think most of them are vocabulary words, but they all appear in this lesson. And you can use those clues to find the words, make sure they fit, make sure you're spelling them correctly, because that could affect how others fit. And even if not, the words are right in front of you in your textbook, so you need to be spelling them correctly. Okay, it's only the front, there is no back. So you can go ahead and do that now, or you can wait until later. I'd go ahead and do it now while it's fresh on your mind. And that's it. Reach out to me if you have any questions about today's lesson between 1 and 5 this afternoon.